Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Lewis. I'm the veterinarian here at Seneca Park Zoo. Welcome to our animal hospital. Just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things we do in the hospital and the way we care for the animals here at the zoo. One of the really neat things about being a zoo veterinarian is the range of animals that we have to take care of. And so for a lot of our animals, a lot of the veterinary care happens in their exhibits or in their habitats. So I make a lot of house calls. We go to the animals and try to provide whatever care we can there before we bring them here. But sometimes to get a really good look at an animal or to treat a problem, we have to bring them here. And since most of our animals are wild, they're a little bit dangerous, that means we have to anesthetize them. So there's a lot of different ways that we get to anesthetize them. Luckily, a lot of our animals are trained to take injections, so they'll put up their butts or their shoulders up against the mesh, and we can give them an injection that way, and then bring them here. Sometimes, though, an animal may not come totally close to the mesh, so we'll use this. It's called a syringe pull. So the syringe goes on the end, and if the animal won't come totally close, but just close enough, we can stick this through the mesh and safely inject them that way. Other times an animal may not come close at all, and we have to use a dart. And again, luckily most of our animals are trained so that we don't have to do this very often anymore, but we do sometimes, so we keep this available in our hospital. And so these are just the range of different darts that we might use. So a smaller dart with a shorter needle for a smaller animal, and then all the way up to something bigger like we might use for a zebra. And we can deliver the darts in a couple of different ways. This is a blowpipe, and so we put the dart in and just blow, and just the force of air going through the pipe darts the animal. If we have to dart a bigger animal like a rhino or a polar bear that has thicker skin, or something that might be a little bit farther away, we can use this pistol that has a carbon dioxide chamber in it that generates more pressure to shoot the dart farther with more pressure to hit an animal. So once they get anesthetized, we bring them to the hospital. We'll usually set them right up here on our treatment table, and monitoring anesthesia is really important. So this is an anesthetic monitor that tells us their heart rates, their blood pressure, how much carbon dioxide they're breathing out, how much oxygen they're breathing in, which is all really important to make sure they stay stable throughout the whole anesthesia procedure. One of the other cool things about being a veterinarian at the zoo is the range of animals that we have to care for. So we take care of birds that might weigh 20 or 30 grams, and this is an endotracheal tube for that size animal. So this would go into their trachea or windpipe to give them anesthetic throughout the procedure. So that little tube would go into a small bird, and then something all the way up to an elephant or a rhino that might weigh 8,000 pounds. So all the way up to that size. So quite the range of species that we see. Once the animals come here, we put them on an anesthesia machine. So we use injectable anesthetics to get them here, and then to maintain anesthesia, we use a gas anesthetic called isoflurane. So this anesthetic machine has oxygen going through it that picks up the anesthetic gas, comes through the machine and goes into the animal. And then the animal will breathe that anesthetic in. It'll go through their lungs into their brain to keep them anesthetized, and then they breathe back out. And this tube takes away the carbon dioxide. It goes through the machine and out through this part has soda lime in it that actually absorbs all the carbon dioxide. So then that oxygen can go back into the animal, and so it saves oxygen. So the zoo animals don't really tell us when they're sick. We have to watch their behavior, really subtle changes to know something's wrong with them. And then when we understand that something's wrong with them, it's kind of difficult to figure it out. So we have to do a lot of different diagnostic testing. And one of the most common things that we do is blood work. And so we can do a lot of that in-house. And so when we bring an animal here, or if an animal's trained to voluntarily give a blood sample, we can take a blood sample and do some of it here. And again, talking about the different sizes of animals that we have. So sometimes for smaller animals, you can't take that much blood. So we have these little tubes. And then for the bigger animals, we can take a lot more blood and do a lot more testing. So the bigger animal, the more blood you can take. We have different types of tubes. So these purple top tubes have something in them that keeps the blood from clotting. And so that lets us look at the blood cells. And so once this tube has blood in it, we can make what's called a blood smear. And so the goal is to make a cell layer that's 1 cell thick, or a layer that's 1 cell thick, so that we can see every individual cell. So this is a smear from an elephant. And so you can see all these little circles that don't have anything inside. Those are called red blood cells. So they don't have a nucleus, and they're responsible for carrying oxygen. And then this 1 cell here that you see, that lobed nucleus, that's a white blood cell. That's actually called a neutrophil. So that's the type of white blood cell that's responsible for fighting infections. And you can see there's a lot more red blood cells than white blood cells. So that's one of the things we look at. So how many red blood cells there are, what they look like, how many white blood cells there are, the different types of white blood cells, to understand if the animal's healthy, if they're having an appropriate response to an infection or some inflammatory process. And these red and yellow tubes don't have anything in them, so once the blood goes into the tube, it clots. And so then we can put that into a centrifuge and spin it. And so the cells that are heavier settle down to the bottom of the tube, and at the top is what's called serum. So that's the liquid part of the blood. And once we have that, we can look at what's inside. And so there's different electrolytes, different types of proteins, and that tells us more about organ function. And so we have these machines here that tell us a lot of that basic testing, so we can get an answer right away, sometimes while the animal's still anesthetized. So if there's another test that we need to do, or another sample, or we can start treatment right away before the animal wakes up, and we might have to anesthetize it again. Now we're in our radiology suite, or our surgery suite. Since we don't do a lot of surgery here, we keep this room for multi-purpose. So we have our radiology equipment here. So this is a digital x-ray machine. And so this machine actually creates x-rays that have radiation. Because they make radiation, we have to wear lead gowns to protect ourselves from that radiation during the exams. So the x-ray comes down out of this part of the machine, and it hits this plate, and then it actually causes a reaction into the plate that wirelessly sends an image to our computer system. And so as the x-rays hit the animal, they're changed, their direction is changed, their density is changed, their speed is changed, and the plate, and so then the x-rays that actually hit the plate are picked up by that, and the computer can generate an image based on the deflections that it picks up. This is a radiograph from our red-tailed hawk named Tony. So we had her here just for a routine health assessment. So she's healthy in this image, and so in x-rays, because the bones and the harder, denser structures absorb the x-rays, those turn out to be white on the screen, whereas air turns out to be black. So you can see her bones are nice and white. They're really what we call opaque. And her lungs, which are right here, so they're filled with air, so they're nice and black. And one of the really interesting things about birds is that they have bones that are called pneumatic, so they're actually part of their respiratory system. And so you can see these bones here, so that's her humerus, and those are her femurs. And so those actually are filled with air. You can see that how it's different from this bone. So those are called pneumatic bones. So they're part of the respiratory system that make their breathing more efficient and keep the bones lighter, so as required for flight. So this is her spine. These are her wings coming out. This is her heart here, her liver, and then this is all of her gastrointestinal tract. You can't really make out a lot of difference in it because everything's kind of superimposed on one another. And then these are her legs and her feet coming down. So this is our ultrasound machine. So this is another type of imaging modality that we have. So the x-rays are really good to help us look at bones, but sometimes when we need to see actually the abdominal organs or the organs in the belly, the ultrasound is better. So the ultrasound actually uses sound waves. So this piece is called a probe, and so the probe sends out sound waves into the body, and then those sound waves get reflected by the organs and get sent back to the probe. And so whatever, depending on how the waves get manipulated, the probe is able to sense that and display an image on the screen. And again, because we have so many different animals here, we have to have different probes. So the different probes send out sound waves of different frequencies. So that helps us be able to see into a smaller animal or to a bigger animal with the same amount of resolution or the same amount of detail. So we have different types of probes to do that, to help us do that. And then because a lot of times we have to go to the animals, this is portable, so this ultrasound is actually like a laptop, so we can take it to the elephants to check their reproductive tract. We can take it to the sea lions to look inside their abdomen, so they don't have to come here. We can go to them and do a lot of these diagnostics. One of the best things about ultrasound is that it's really safe, so there's no radiation, it's not harmful to anybody, so we don't have to wear any protective equipment, and it gives us a really good view of what's going on inside the body when we're talking about soft tissues. Thank you for visiting our animal hospital today. I hope you learned a lot about how we take care of the animals to keep them happy and healthy for you to enjoy.